Usually, a broken bone gives you a really clean X-ray. You get that stark black and white image and the doctor points to a jagged little line.
Right, there's an undeniable comfort in that. It's binary.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
broken or it's not.
Uh-huh.
But what happens when you try to take an X-ray of a broken childhood? Suddenly, the machine just doesn't work.
Yeah, you're staring at this murky, confusing picture of emotional neglect.
Yeah, and there is no doctor to point out exactly where the fracture happened. So today, we are looking at the messy reality of generational trauma and how a literal fairy tale made it so much harder to heal.
You really did.
Welcome to your deep dive. Today's mission is deeply personal. It's designed specifically for you, the listener, as we unpack a profoundly rich, emotionally raw set of notes you actually provided for us to analyze.
It's a fascinating collision, really. We're looking at the gritty reality of inherited wounds crashing right into those sanitized, perfectly packaged, happily ever after narratives.
The one's culture sold us to cover up that mess.
Exactly. And it is a striking juxtaposition. On one hand, you have the quiet, often invisible pain of a child's unmet needs. And on the other, you have these loud, culturally dominant stories of magical rescues.
Like effortless love, basically.
Right. So as we explore the source material you've shared, we are going to look closely at the active, incredibly brave work of self-rescue. The author of these notes synthesizes psychological frameworks with biblical perspectives.
Which is such an interesting mix.
It is, and they use it to map out a journey from that early emotional blindness all the way to breaking the cycle for the next generation.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the narrative here doesn't actually begin with the fairy tales, does it?
No, it doesn't.
It starts at the root of the wound with the environment that made a child crave those fairy tales in the first place. The notes describe this profound emotional disconnect, pointing out that their parents simply didn't know how to look at them.
The origin point of the trauma, right there. And the notes are very careful to frame this with empathy rather than blame, which is hard to do.
So hard.
The author explicitly states that the parents weren't acting out of malice. They simply lacked the awareness to truly see their child's emotional state.
Because they were passing down the exact same emotional blindness they got.
Precisely. In psychology, we look at this through the lens of generational trauma. It's the unintentional transfer of, maladaptive coping mechanisms and emotional deficits from one generation to the next.
It kind of makes me think of inheriting a cherished family recipe book,
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, it's handed down to you, but the pages on emotional validation, the instructions on how to actually sit with and process uncomfortable feelings, those pages were simply torn out.
Decades before anyone ever handed the book to your parents.
Exactly. You can't cook a meal you were never given the recipe for.
What's fascinating here is that the sources point out this specific lack of validation didn't primarily create resentment in the child.
Really? Because you'd expect anger to be the dominant emotion.
Right, but instead, this emotional starvation created a profound hunger, a deep, aching need to just be seen, to hear a caregiver look at them and say, "What you feel matters. Your internal experience is real."
Wow. It is the literal hunger of an unacknowledged inner child.
Exactly. And to illustrate this, the author brings in a perspective from the teachings of Jesus, specifically the passage about letting the children come to him.
Oh, I know that one.
Yeah, the author uses this biblical text to construct a really sharp psychological insight. Children are fundamentally unfiltered. They experience hurt without rationalizing it.
They don't try to intellectualize it away.
No, they feel joy without masking it, and they love without conditions.
So when an adult's feelings are consistently dismissed or ignored over the years, the adult body grows up, but psychologically there is still an unfiltered inner child standing there.
Just waiting for permission to feel.
Man, and when you have a starving inner child, you don't exactly have the luxury of holding out for a balanced, nutritional, emotional meal.
You eat whatever is placed in front of you.
Right. Which is the perfect way to understand why we latched onto the cultural junk food we were fed.
Yeah.
Because there was this gaping emotional void. We desperately bought into the narratives that promised a magical, painless fix.
We bought into the Disney illusion.
Completely. And the sources draw a very stark contrast between that commercialized Disney version of love and the gritty reality of human relationships.
We were just saturated with stories where princes swooped in to save the day, right? Where a woman waiting patiently and, passively in a tower was framed as the ultimate virtue.
Or doing nothing was the goal.
Exactly. And where love conquered absolutely every obstacle with a single magic kiss.
The notes actually make a really clever play on words to highlight this disappointment. In Spanish, Prince Charming translates literally to the Blue Prince.
Ah, right.
And the author writes, "We expected a blue prince who never arrived in that color."
That's a great line.
It is. The promised happily ever after turned out to be a whole lot more about the forever than it was about the happy.
Right, the endurance of it.
Yeah. But I want to push back on this for a second because I think a lot of people listening might wonder, isn't it just a bit cynical to tear down classic fairy tales? Like, weren't they just harmless escapism for a kid who was going through a tough time at home?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is not about cynicism. It's about the psychological damage of cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, escapism becomes actively harmful when it forms your baseline expectation for reality. Because of these stories, no one prepared the author for the fact that true, enduring love actually argues. It gets exhausted.
It's messy.
Very messy. It occasionally fails and has to be rebuilt from the ground up.
The magic castle might just be a normal mundane house with a leaky roof and a mortgage.
Exactly. The danger of the Disney illusion, as outlined in the text, is that it takes normal, everyday human friction and amplifies it into catastrophic failure.
Oh, I see.
If your subconscious standard is a magical, effortless, happily ever after, then a standard disagreement with a partner feels like the absolute end of the world.
Right? Your brain registers normal conflict as a signal that the fairy tale is broken and therefore you are about to be abandoned.
Which creates this intense humming anxiety in the background of everyday life.
Yeah, and the notes talk very openly about how this friction between the fairy tale expectation and the messy reality leads directly to our coping mechanisms.
There's one specific behavior mentioned that I think really stands out.
Yes, I bet you listening right now might immediately recognize this in yourself. It's the desperate burning need to always know where the other person is.
The constant, exhausting monitoring of a partner's mood, their location, their tone of voice.
For a long time, the author thought this was a personal defect, like a controlling mania. But I read it as having a malfunctioning emotional radar system.
That's a very empathetic way to frame it.
You aren't trying to aggressively control the airspace around you. You are just absolutely terrified of being left completely alone on the tarmac. You're pinging the radar constantly just to get a bounce back that proves someone is still there.
And to understand the mechanics of that radar, we have to look at a concept called hyperarousal.
Okay, what is that?
It's a key component of attachment theory. When a child experiences emotional neglect, the brain's alarm center, the amygdala, begins to treat emotional abandonment the same way it treats a physical predator.
Wow, literally like a life or death threat.
Yes, it wires the nervous system to stay on high alert. So the analysis in the sources reframes this monitoring behavior completely. It is not an attempt to control another person.
It's a biological survival strategy.
Exactly. Your body learned at a very early age that if it doesn't stay hypervigilant, it will be left behind. The radar has to stay on or you won't survive.
That makes the contrast with the fairy tale even more jarring, I think. In the Disney trope, you have the princess passively, beautifully waiting in a tower, full of faith, singing out the window.
Right. Waiting is romanticized as this peaceful state of grace.
But in the reality of trauma, waiting is agonizing. Trusting someone is terrifying.
When your nervous system is wired for hyperarousal, trusting someone doesn't feel like resting in a safe, secure tower. It feels like stepping off a ledge and staring into an abyss.
Just like...
To navigate this terror, the source brings in a biblical reference from the Psalms, actually. It's about being able to lie down and sleep in peace.
Because to actually fall asleep, you have to do the scariest thing possible. You have to turn the radar off.
Yes, you have to close your eyes, drop your defenses, and physically stop monitoring your environment.
It highlights the incredibly difficult, agonizingly slow journey of retraining the nervous system.
Learning to trust without constantly vigilating is the process of accepting a very hard truth. Yes, maybe people will leave, but even if they do, we have the internal capacity to survive the pain.
The abyss will not swallow us.
Exactly.
But, surviving that abyss and building that kind of robust internal trust requires looking incredibly honestly at ourselves. And here's where it gets really interesting, because the author pivots to focus intensely on the sanctity of the words we use.
Right. There is a deep, lingering pain expressed in these notes, caused by people who promise things and then simply don't deliver.
In the fairy tales, vows are unbreakable, right? The prince's word literally has magic binding it. But the real world is littered with broken promises.
For someone whose baseline is emotional neglect, a broken promise is not just a minor inconvenience or a change of plans.
What is it then?
It is a profound betrayal that validates their deepest fear that they are not important enough to be remembered. It triggers that amygdala alarm all over again.
Wow.
Consequently, the author takes language very seriously. If they say something, they mean it. Their word must become sacred to counteract the chaos of their childhood.
I do have a question about the practicality of that, though. Like, if the world is full of breaking promises and people are constantly playing games with words, how do you maintain that strict internal integrity without just becoming completely guarded?
That's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, don't you just end up building an impenetrable, cynical fortress to protect yourself from everyone else's unreliability?
Well, the author finds a pathway through that cynicism by pointing to another framework cited in the notes. It's based on the teaching of Jesus, let your yes be yes and your no be no.
Okay.
The author utilizes this not just as a moral guideline, but as a psychological boundary. The philosophy is that your words must come genuinely from your own heart, tethered to your own reality.
Regardless of the games the rest of the world is playing.
Right. But achieving that level of unshakable integrity requires a brutal, unflinching honesty with ourselves first.
We have to turn the spotlight inward.
We must. We have to admit that our own past ignorance, our own unhealed wounds have caused harm to others. The author talks about the painful, humbling process of recognizing that, despite their best intentions, they occasionally repeated the very behaviors they swore they wouldn't.
Oof. That is a hard pill to swallow.
It requires asking for forgiveness, sometimes out loud, and sometimes in the silence of our own reflections. The text quotes the phrase, "The truth will set you free."
Right. By facing our own messy, uncomfortable truth, our capacity to both be hurt and to cause hurt, we finally earn the right to take off the heavy armor.
The prince helmets and the restrictive, suffocating princess costumes.
Yeah. We wore them for so long as survival mechanisms, trying to play a flawless part in a story that wasn't even real. By facing the truth, we give ourselves permission to just be human.
The notes capture this beautifully. We get to have days where we feel like royalty and days where we feel like an absolute toad.
Removing that armor is what makes the next phase possible, I think. Because once we accept our own messy, imperfect humanity, we are finally equipped with the emotional bandwidth to do the most important work of all.
Stopping the cycle.
Yes. Ensuring that the children coming up behind us do not inherit these same invisible wounds. The ultimate triumph in these notes isn't about finding a perfect romantic partner.
Not at all.
It's about doing the gritty, daily work of parenting differently. The author writes about the simple, profound act of telling a child what you feel is valid, even if I don't see it the same way.
This raises an important question, though, about the granular difficulty of actually stopping generational trauma.
How so?
Because it is one thing to understand it intellectually. It is entirely another to practice it in the moment. Imagine standing in a room with a crying child. Their emotions are chaotic and loud.
Oh yeah, triggering for sure.
If you are a parent carrying unhealed trauma, your own neglected inner child might be screaming internally, feeling triggered by the noise and the demand. The cognitive load required to take a breath, suppress your own defensive reaction, and calmly validate that child's reality, it is immense.
It takes phenomenal strength.
But just saying those words out loud, validating their reality, acts as a circuit breaker.
It snaps a chain of generational trauma that stretches back through time to ancestors we don't even know.
The sources touch upon this by bringing in a biblical concept regarding legacy, the idea that the sins or the brokenness of the parents can affect the third and fourth generations, but contrasting that with the idea that divine mercy reaches 1,000 generations.
Wow, 1,000 generations.
Regardless of your personal theological background, the author is using this as a profound psychological blueprint. Breaking the chain means two very distinct actions.
What are they?
It means actively absorbing the shock to stop the transmission of the bad, and it means deliberately, consciously initiating the transmission of the good.
And in doing that exhausting work, a beautiful secondary effect happens. We heal our children, and without even realizing it, they begin to heal us.
That inner child we talked about earlier.
The one starved for validation. When we look our own kids in the eye and tell them their feelings matter, we are retroactively validating ourselves.
Well, you are.
And I absolutely love the news stories the authors telling their children to pass on this good. They aren't throwing out stories altogether, you know. They're rewriting the mythology.
Telling their kids that princesses get their feet dirty.
Yes. Telling them that princes are allowed to cry. They're teaching them that love isn't some magic spell that swoops in and rescues you from your life.
It is a daily, deliberate decision to accompany someone through their life.
It is the crucial shift from passive waiting to active participation. You are no longer waiting for a spell to break so your life can begin.
You are building a life day by day, fully acknowledging both the beauty of the connection and the difficulty of the maintenance.
So what does this all mean for you? As you listen to this, processing the weight of these notes, it means you are on a journey of profound self-rescue. You are no longer that child waiting in a tower, scanning the horizon for a magical ending that was never going to come.
You are an adult, and you are building your own ending brick by uneven brick.
You are building it through the sun and through the inevitable storms. The realization that you do not need a Prince Charming to save you, and that a princess is perfectly capable of rolling up her sleeves and rescuing herself, that is an incredibly empowering, life-altering shift in perspective.
It is the transition from a fragile fantasy to a resilient, grounded reality. And the final anchor the author offers in these sources is deeply comforting for anyone doing this heavy lifting.
What is that?
They remind us of the invitation for the weary and heavy-laden to come and find rest. The profound takeaway here is that even when you are utterly exhausted from breaking those generational chains, even when the metaphorical castle feels like it is falling apart around you, you have a right to rest.
Your feelings are inherently valid.
Even if they were unseen by others, even if they were misunderstood by the very people who are supposed to protect and guide you,
Right.
are valid. And recognizing your own inherent worth is a real, grounded, happy ending.
It's not magic, but it's real.
It's real.
And because you are now the author of your own story, and because you've finally thrown away that restrictive, perfectly sanitized fairy tale script that never fit you in the first place, I want to leave you with this to mull over. Think back to that X-ray machine we talked about at the very beginning. You aren't staring at a murky picture of a broken past anymore, waiting for someone else to diagnose it. You're holding the pen. So, what is the very first entirely honest sentence of the next chapter you are going to write for yourself?